Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I've got a very exciting guest for you guys. For those of you just joining the podcast, we're E.N.G Media, and today I have Alex with me, founder and CEO of Project Simple. So just wanted to tell you, Alex, thank you for coming on our show. I'm really excited to dive into all the awesome stuff that you're working on and kind of your background leading up to this point as well.
Awesome, Tyson. Well, thanks for inviting me. This is great. Happy to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that when you and I first connected, you hit on some specific pain points of my previous work experience as like a quality assurance engineer for an e-commerce company working alongside product teams, tech teams, and marketing teams to roll out different products to the market. So maybe we kind of just cover your background leading up to this point. Really, what led you to start Project Simple and then kind of maybe dive into like an overview of really what you guys are looking to solve?
Uh, yeah, sure. So I've been an engineer for about 25 years. Even when I didn't hold the roles of an engineer, I would always think in terms of engineer, very analytical. And the biggest struggles I had when I got into entrepreneurship was finally experiencing the challenges of the leadership. I'm now leading the teams instead of working inside of the teams. And I'm beginning to understand how it's very hard to track execution, even to the point where I'm relying on people to make the right moves, make the right decisions. However, things fall through. And in my previous startup, I made promises to customers and then even broke down the work. And even then had instances where teams didn't deliver on time. So it was a constant point of frustration because I now experience that from the other angle. And meanwhile, I also understand the challenges from a development side. So I've learned that we have to figure out a different way to bind the entire teamwork together. I hate micromanagement. I like self-managing teams, but I also need trust. I also need to understand that they're covering their bases, and I need to know about risks as soon as they arise. So when I started running the companies, the biggest thing I've learned is that I have three tools available to me at my disposal to fix any potential delivery problem. And that was trim the scope, extend the timeline, or add people. But if the teams are constantly coming to me way too late, I have none of those tools available to me. So what started out as a mere AI forecasting solution to figure out if the teams are running late became a full-fledged project management platform. So we're pretty excited about that. Yeah, but it wasn't a planned route. We just kind of evolved into it.
Yeah. 100%. I appreciate you giving us some background leading up to this point. And a key question that I have for you as well is, you think that, and I'm excited to dive into exactly what you guys specialize in, but do you think you would have been able to deliver this, this type of software to the market at the level and of execution that you have without your previous 25 years of experience as an engineer?
Good question. So we have to really dive into the current product management platforms on the market for software engineering and product development. The Jiras, the ClickUps, Mondays, Asanas, even Linears, and, all of those systems, how they got created. And most of them really got created by following two approaches. Jira is the leader, so let's copy the Jira, but make it a little bit better experience, right? And the second approach was, let's also read a bunch of agile books and just follow the prompts and follow the requirements in those books. Very few of those systems, aside from the collaboration angle, have really brought anything super innovative. Trello is the biggest one that did. They just brought the board to life that, teams were using inside. But for the lack of a better alternative, they are still ticketing system in the end of the day. And that's not the problems that teams are experiencing. It's not about tracking tickets because that creates micromanagement. It's about building that cohesiveness within the team. It's about structuring the product for execution. It's about figuring out if you're going to deliver on time. It's about all those other things that are involved in engineering and product development. To the point of trade-offs, for example, if you deliver more product features, then you're probably neglecting bugs and support cases and tech debt. It's just natural because time is time, and where you invest the time is fixed. It's, unless you hire a whole bunch of other teams. So for the most part, it's always a trade-off. It's always a balancing act. And most people really don't know the outcome of their decisions. So when we reached that market, we built our own project management systems, obviously using a lot of my own experience. It's a very opinionated software, meaning it teaches you how to be agile. It
Mhm.
helps transform the team without having to actually do this by hand.
Gotcha.
A lot of companies hire consultants, agile coaches to transform, and it's hit and miss. We actually built the system that just basically makes it easier to get that without subjective interpretation. And number two, we wanted to build a platform that actually solves the problem with product delivery, that helps establish certain types of behaviors within the team. And the focus was not, hey, let's figure out how we can get a better experience for task management. The
Mhm.
focus was, how do we organize the teams and drive the right behaviors? How do we
Yeah.
get rid of the micromanagement? How do we let the teams work the way they work and learn how they actually operate and teach them about the way they function? Like the analogy I have, I'm a table tennis coach, right? So whenever I have a new student, I watch him hit a few shots here and there, and I can immediately dissect the game and tell him the weakness and the strength, right? Watch a couple matches, and I already have a plan how to improve that person. You'd be surprised how many engineering managers and product managers really don't know the strength and weakness of their team. And they look at it subjectively. They just look at what they have to accomplish, and yet the pursuit of that goal is there, but they
Yeah.
really don't know how to optimize that whole experience. We wanted to flip that model upside down. Let's adopt all of the thinking out of the DevOps movement so that we know every step of the way how the team actually operates without forcing them to operate a certain way.
Yeah. 100%. And so you're basically saying that it's not about the amount of tickets that have to be done. It sounds like a lot of these teams are kind of repeating the same mistakes over and over again, just from kind of what you had explained as well. So you guys are more focused on the behavior of the team overall as a whole and kind of getting to the root of it. So that way you're able to make sure that, maybe the process is fixed overall. And I was going to ask you as well, Alex, could you maybe give us an example of how you guys are taking the kind of a behavior first approach into how you're looking at these dev teams and using Project Simple to kind of, try to promote more efficient projects, management and like the way that things get done as well?
So, very good question. We have to start a little bit with the history here. Okay. So, we started by trying to create AI forecasting. Now, this is before ChatGPT came out. We were meddling with this, and obviously, we had to take a different route after this whole AI craze. But we started just trying to build AI forecasting model. How do we know we're delivering on time? Right. And then the first thing we did is we pulled a whole bunch of projects from systems like Jira and we try to interpret what the data tells us
Yes.
because the model had to rely on the data. And we've learned that none of that actually helps us. Why? If you run a small team and that's your entire product, it doesn't matter. You don't need anything. Task Tracker, Excel is good enough, right? You can do project management on the napkin. But the moment you start having a large team, like 7, 10 people or more, the moment you start having multiple teams, which is obviously not the startup, not the early startup route, it's now more, medium business and enterprise, you start realizing that you only have information at the team level and you don't have the visibility at the product level. How you divide the work, how you plan the work across the product, spread it across multiple teams, pursuing multiple goals at the same time. These are all the dysfunctions that unfortunately people do because they don't realize they're doing it.
Right.
And the systems don't really help them. They just basically plug you in and you're lucky at the team level if you can keep moving. But at the product level, it's a whole different story. So when we pulled the data and we looked at those teams, the multi-product teams, we've learned that each team operates differently. Each team uses different statuses. Each team has its own flow.
Yep.
Each team has its own subjective interpretation of agile. And the question is, well, how can you compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges when you have different teams doing absolutely different things and you're
Right.
trying to have forecasting actually predict your delivery? So we knew we needed to get the right data, but in order to get the right data, we needed to address the discipline. We needed to make a consistent process across all of the teams that was actually powerful, straightforward, and simple. And that became kind of the push behind evolving us into a full-fledged project management system. We needed to generate our own data
Mhm.
and we needed teams to follow a certain approach. But we said it that we basically met and discussed it. And I said, look, if we're going to build another Jira, I'm not interested. So we have to
Right.
build something that's a lot better. We have to build something that helps the teams in the way that I wish we worked when I was an engineer, right? The better experiences. Like, I'll give you an example.
Uh-huh.
I always hated when the manager said, "What's your status? Where are you with this?" This form of micromanagement was frustrating, right? So we fixed that problem. Our statuses are automatic. You don't actually change a status in a platform. It automatically flips depending on the work remaining, which now gives us very accurate data how the teams are actually functioning. And that entire flip is a whole change in behavior, because now it's no longer a problem with the statuses. It's now more of improving how the teams collaborate. So the
Right.
question is, how do we now teach the team to hand off work from each other that they implement? How do they start collaborating better? How do we control work in progress? How do we optimize the flow? And a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
So those were the unique things that we wanted to bring, because that's how the best teams function.
Yeah, 100%. I know, at least in my personal experience as well, having to work cross-functionally between departments. I started out as being a part of the tech team, going through the 2-week sprints, doing the quality assurance work as the devs would build out the new technology. Eventually I ended up switching into the marketing department, and I could see the friction between the two departments. And once tech would have their 2-week sprints, and they're more incentivized by changing the status of their tickets to report maybe to like the higher ups and the executives. They would come to the marketing team and ask, where they were, if they had any questions. And there was just like this huge misalignment, and the teams would often fight. Things often wouldn't get done. And, good luck, I guess, trying to add visibility into that whole entire process as well. We'd have specific leaders come in and ask where the tech department was at, and ask where the marketing department was at, and just kind of like the overall project as a whole. But it was just a complete mess. I could totally see how Project Simple solutions are built for maybe not the smaller teams that, as you mentioned, they can use Excel and like they're good to go. Maybe there's not that many folks, or they're not deploying like these really large deployments. But, for these mid-market companies that they've got, 50 to 80 employees, and maybe they're doing several deployments every single month. I could totally see how that friction can continue to increase the more that they look to get done. And it's interesting to see how you guys are hopping in and trying to help solve that. So I'm sure in your experience as well as an engineer, as you mentioned, it's annoying when people are asking you what is the status of a specific ticket, but then you're missing something. You need something from a different team. So you guys almost built out like this holistic platform, from what it sounds like, that, marketing, product, and technology teams can kind of all come in and look at the project overall as a whole. Would you say that that's how you guys are looking at it?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, like, if you take a position of product, just because a feature is done and it's deployed doesn't mean that the product manager's job on that feature is complete. There's
Mhm.
all these marketing steps. There's content, there's updating, help desk. There's a lot of other things that need to happen. Landing pages, marketing pages, you got your email campaigns, you got a lot of things that are happening. And
Yeah.
development teams is not the only thing in product delivery. But I guess the biggest part in what you've said, I immediately had this aha moment where, teams are never actually done with what they're working on. There's so much push to mark something completed while there are loose ends that we even created a term called the done done. Is it done or is it just done? Right? And
Yeah.
pretty soon, like I make a joke of it, pretty soon we call it the done, right? So it's just natural that people always cut corners
Right.
attempting to satisfy some bigger expectation. And so what you have is a lot of loose ends. I mean, I'll give you an example. On our platform, we have a concept called bug waterline.
Mm.
We establish thresholds. Well, actually, we don't establish the project, and all the teams, they establish one threshold of bugs they will not exceed. And they're designed to keep the discipline of bug control um, clear and upfront. So the quality gate first. And the reason that's more important is I can't tell you how many uh, organizations I spoke with. I ask them a question, how long you been running your product? And they're like, well, a year. I'm like, how many bugs do you have? 500. You
Jeez.
can't manage 500 bugs. I don't care if you have 10 teams. That's already unmanageable, right? I mean, we've been implementing our software for a little nearly 4 years now, and we have 14 bugs in the system. 14. 1.4. That's it. That's because our waterline constantly has this look towards the quality. Now, maybe your software is okay to have a lot of bugs, or maybe you're just creating things that aren't bugs, but then it's the job of product to clean that up and keep it at a low count.
Right.
But all of that discipline of cleanup, of following through, of figuring out the prioritization, all of that is where a lot of teams struggle. And the tools they use do not make it any better. I mean, we've solved that problem too. But it's one of those things where instead of solving the problem of task tracking, comments and videos and attachments and
Right.
the typical stuff, we wanted to solve what the team actually experiences, what every engineer finds frustrating, what every product manager finds frustrating, what every engineering leader, like VP of engineering, director,
Mhm.
CTO finds frustrating. It needs to be a platform for the entire engineering and product team, not just task manager. Oh, this is for engineers and we're going to do our stuff elsewhere. So that's the whole vision behind it. We didn't want to be another, Scrum
Right.
slash Kanban slash, Trello implementation. There's plenty of that, but for the most part, Trello doesn't work if the list is too big.
Mhm.
There's no strategic stuff, and Atlassian wants people to use kind of the Jira world, so they're actually phasing some of the customers out of it because they make more money selling them 20 different products. All the other tools they miss. I mean, how many times have I come across customers that use like Jira for engineering, Monday for marketing,
Right.
and their problem is they don't know where they are. Here's an example. You have a team and the team relies on the UI UX designer to help craft user experience first
Right.
approach. And they never know what that person's working on, and they can never get their time and that creates bottlenecks, like huge bottlenecks, performance problems, rework, a lot of things that can be avoided if you just bring them in. And for example, for us, we have UI UX design team that
Mhm.
works on strategic items. But when the team pulls, they are a participant across multiple teams. So they immediately jump in and help out the teams. That's their number one motto. If the
Mhm.
team asks them, they solve that problem first. They unblock, then go back to the strategic work.
Nice.
These are behaviors that are constantly encountered in all of the teams.
Yeah.
But all of these problems are solved using what? Soft skills. Hey, there's something for you, like, the Slack channel. Could you please take care of that? The asynchronous approach.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just not efficient. That's not productive. That
Mhm.
still encounters a lot of rework and costs a lot of money. So I think we're in a different age where speed to market and quality
Yeah.
need a different approach. So, and the problems are not going away. They're
Right.
just they're becoming even more painful.
100%. I love the bug watermark example, waterline example that you'd mentioned, how you guys are actually using it to run your own projects for Project Simple software. And so you're actually practicing what you preach. And I think that's important just so that way you guys know what you're building. And obviously you have all the experience, from the 25 years of being an engineer, but with your team as well, new things might come up, or I'm sure that through using the same SOPs that you're telling your customers to use, you've been able to add more value to them and provide more of like a holistic solution. So I think that's interesting as well. But for teams, and you gave a few insights around how they can maybe tactically make this change. But for the VP of engineering that might say, "Hey, Alex, all of this sounds great. Project Simple sounds like an awesome software, but I don't think that it's something we can make a switch to because of the way that our process and the way that our projects are currently ran." What are maybe some tactical ways that they can make that change, or some things that you guys are doing on your end to mitigate that risk, I guess, as you would call it for them?
Yeah, getting people to see that it's an absolutely different software and understand it, and then get through the organizational quote unquote habit system. I mean, Jira is a prime example. Nobody likes it, but then everyone still uses it. Nobody understands the value except for the fact that it holds years and years of data.
Right.
And people sort of have the shell shock syndrome and PTSD from the last time they try to switch to something else, that they like stay away from any of these updates. Well, we made it easy. We built what's called a Jira bidirectional sync. So
Mhm.
we import everything We enable bidirectional sync, and people just work transparently in the new system. They don't touch the old one until they obviously want to disconnect it, because we do everything that Jira doesn't. The question here is merely what the organization wants to do,
Mhm.
right? There's different ways. You could just start a new project in a new system. Nothing's lost. You can transition one project at a time. You can transition one team at a time, because the workspaces, the backlogs, they're not at the product level, they're all at the team level.
Right.
What we've done for some customers is we've pulled in multiple teams' work from each of their workspaces and built a centralized product model, which was basically a huge surprise, because that became an absolutely different view that they never had before. Every organization is going to approach it differently.
Yeah.
And, you and I know in the world of startups, it's always early adopters. Then you have basically everybody else in the laggard. And early adopters will experience the most value. I mean, we've observed improvements that are, nearly 30%. We've observed 5 times quality improvements.
Yeah.
I mean, if I start sharing the data of case studies, and we're kind of delayed on all our marketing, that's our
Mhm.
kind of biggest weakness in our company. But if I start sharing all the case studies, there are tremendous things to learn from. But then we also had sort of the renegades,
Uh,
right? Which is like, a team is going to approach us. They're going to sign up. The cost per user is so low that they sign up. They convert their entire team. They connect with Jira integration, and their leadership doesn't even know that they're operating in a different system, and they're happy about how they're doing it. And
yeah.
so we've had some of those. It was pretty cool to see that people try to go away from the what I call is useless governance. I mean,
Yeah.
I get the governance for security and all of that stuff, but sometimes you're just building another CRM system, nothing super secret. And, you need a better way to work with your team. So,
100%. Yeah. No, it's super interesting as well. And as I mentioned, the organization that I was working with, 40% of that company was acquired by private equity. When, the company had gone through multiple restructuring, and because I was one of the frontline workers actually in the system, thankfully I wasn't let go during the restructuring, but I seen the multiple different changes out in management. It almost was like they were all trying to solve that same problem of becoming more efficient. And, in my time there, nobody was able to bridge. There was a gap between the technology team and the marketing team, and how deployments were ran, how new products were launched into the market. And so as the management and leaders would go to report maybe to, the private equity, the board as they'd call it, I don't think they were able to fully understand where the problem was as to why they weren't reaching their specific revenue targets and their revenue goals. And, the revenue targets and goals, they didn't have any basis, like they weren't based off of any historical data. It was private equity essentially wanting to make an ROI on the money they had invested into the company. But I think, if you can effectively communicate out to one of these frontline workers, and I think it says something when, as you called them, renegades are coming to you guys and they're kind of going behind their leadership's back to integrate with your platform. It shows that like there's clearly a problem in the market. And for the company I worked with, it was probably a multi-million-dollar problem. And I'm not saying that, if they were to have used the software like Project Simple, they would have exceeded their revenue goals. But I think that there's some hidden value and like, there's better optimizations that could be made to the way the process of these technology teams work. And it's almost like you mentioned, they just accept Jira because it's there and it's easiest and it's low friction. But I just think that that's an interesting kind of situation, and I could totally see how relevant and applicable it was, especially at the previous company that I was working with as well.
well, for some companies like that, I immediately start thinking about the way their reporting structure internally is. And if they're looking to build out products faster or deliver on something, if they're looking at the market, they're trying to grow the company
Mhm.
X-fold so they can sell it again. The biggest struggle is most companies right now still operate by what I call subjective self-reporting metrics. Where are we with this project? We're 75% complete. We're 85% complete. We're 95% complete. We'll never be done, right? But we're going to claim that we're X complete.
Yeah.
What are the things that are holding you back? And, you basically built a list of things that people
Mhm.
can come. And it's all subjective, it's not backed up by data, maybe some data, but it's interpretational. We cut through all of that. We give real dashboards of how the project or product is doing. We provide real execution knowledge. We show the teams how they operate So you can actually have quality metrics going into the board meetings and really explain why you're slow, what the budget should be, and what do you need in order to reach the goals? Because a lot of times that's just not enough. The subjective self-reporting data, I think, is the biggest problem that exists. And again, I've even met some leaders that basically said, Alex, well, don't worry about it. I have a million excuses I could use why we can't hit the target. And that I get that in a big company, it's easy to get lost and kind of hide behind that.
Right.
But at some point, that's going to be grounds for you're not hitting the targets.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so it's only going to last for so long. And you can't blame the developers and product people forever. So I
Yeah.
think accountability is important. But the leaders, I've met leaders that run 150 people teams and have no control whether something's going to be done on time. Absolutely zero. They're just kind of at the mercy, and they know that it's their career, but they feel completely useless in trying to attempt to accelerate or ensure delivery. And I get that. The more people are involved, the harder it is, but it doesn't mean we can't solve that problem. It just means we need a different approach. It's no longer about managing tickets, implementing Scrum, and doing all these things. And we got to get away from vanity metrics and subjective self-reporting, because those things not helpful at all, and they get people in more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I love that you guys mentioned that as you started out essentially trying to leverage AI to implement predictive analytics for some of these teams so they could better understand the completion of their projects, but you kind of realized that just tracking the statuses of specific tickets and tasks wasn't a great predictor of when a project was actually going to be done. So you started looking a little bit more into and back testing, behavioral data as well. So I know that part of your platform still offers predictive analytics, and you guys do have an AI layer to Project Simple as well. Could you maybe dive a little bit deeper into me with that and kind of what that looks like and how it looks at the behavioral data, which is, from what you're saying, that matters more, helps, some of these leaders of organizations better understand what a complete project could look like and kind of how they could optimize their process.
Sure. So imagine that you have a certain feature that you're trying to develop. And, the way that a lot of teams function, they actually don't do a good job decomposing it. Engineers hate decomposition.
Mhm.
So if tools like Jira, where you have like three basic statuses, you can obviously add custom ones, but three basic statuses in progress. That's what people mostly use. And then every day, if you're doing like a daily stand up type of
Mhm.
activity, you'll learn that people are just like, yep, I'm working on it. I'm in progress. I'm in progress. I'm in progress. And that drags on and on and on and on, and people have no idea. So the discipline of decomposition is important, because I really hate the whole in progress thing. In
Right.
progress is not deterministic. However, what is deterministic is knowing, hey, in an hour, somebody's going to complete their task, and in an hour, will be ready to start QAing it. Or to take over and do, let's say a database will be updated, and now I can implement the service layer. Or the service layer is done, now I can start working on the front end. Or maybe I worked on it before because I know that we're going to converge today.
Right.
So when people meet during their daily, they are coordinating activities
Mhm.
versus it's not a status meeting. The status is already up there. We don't need to recite what's on the page. What we need to talk about, what are we doing today? Who needs to talk to who's handing off work? And that's all behavioral science. You need a little bit of that positive peer pressure at the team level for the team to actually collaborate, because there are many teams, once the daily is done, what happens is you don't hear back from anybody until the next day. And then what happens is you lose a day. So if somebody's working on something that just takes a couple hours, but they're only handing off things to people the next day, you just lost a lot of time where you could have accelerated. And this is one of the reasons where there are lots of things in progress, but nothing's completed. And we have a motto with my team: many things in progress is no progress. The behavior at the team level to do the time off, to understand the time left before the next activity takes place,
Yeah.
to focus on number one priority item and swarm the entire team to complete that,
Yeah.
instead of, going after each individual team member to tackle one feature at a time.
Right.
Those are all optimizations and proper experience that we are facilitating, as opposed to, just giving a system that allows anybody to implement any kind of subjective flow, for
Right.
example, something that just like leaves it alone and expect things to be done.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, we've had customers that joined us that did exactly that. They signed up, learned, and saw that their throughput increased significantly because of how they started to approach the development. Previously, they worked kind of just, as sort of driving blind, really didn't know. They had the right intentions. They wanted all to do great, but they really just didn't understand the things that they've implemented inside just weren't.
100%. I think there's so many levers that you can pull when it comes to a team's productivity. And it's almost like Project Simple software kind of highlights those and brings them to life. Like you mentioned, I love that you guys actually put a timestamp on how long certain tasks might take to complete. I can't tell you how many times where we were building a new landing page, we were building a new website, new cart functionality for an e-commerce site. We had to wait until the next day for something that really could have just taken a couple of hours, and that just derailed the whole entire thing. The QA, the UI, UX design, the
But it
promotion.
gets worse. But it gets worse. We right now are in a total remote environment. Certainly, some companies try to bring people in-house, but it's still, I would say, hybrid at best. And we hire a lot of engineers and a lot of product people, QA people all over the world now. The globalization system is a full-fledged. So if you didn't ask a question by 10 a.m. Pacific, you're going to get the answer in a day. So you have
Right.
a very small window, and the collaboration aspects just get even more crucial. Things
Yeah.
can't wait. And so we need not, it's no longer, they used to say that like systems like Jira are collaboration platforms. I totally disagree. They're task tracking platforms. You can collaborate by adding notes, but that's about the only collaboration that exists. We need to start building true collaboration systems, but not the ones that are about features of adding chat and comments and all that stuff. That's easy. That doesn't make it a collaboration platform.
Right.
What does is the behaviors it creates.
100%. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that at this point, with where we are now with technology and with the amount of platforms that have essentially copied Jira, as you mentioned, comments and chats, that's kind of just at the basic level. As you mentioned, it's the actual behaviors among like the teams that are interacting within these environments specifically. I know that you're going to be releasing some more content coming soon for Project Simple. Are there any new initiatives or anything that maybe the audience or anybody listening to this podcast could kind of be on the lookout for, like with Project Simple?
A good question. There's a lot. I mean, it's not by accident that we got the .ai extension. We're doing a lot with AI. We haven't released it because what we're doing is really, really different, but you need to think of it as an product management assistant and Scrum Master assistant if you're following Scrum, an engineering manager assistant. We're going towards the agentic workflows, but they're sort of different because they're not really doing work for you, but they're telling you about things that are happening within your teams.
Oh wow.
You no longer need to start reading charts and understanding burn downs and all kinds of other things that no executive wants to go through. This system can tell you exactly where your teams are. Unadulterated, honest, transparent, harsh, but true. So you can make the right decisions. And that's at every echelon, at the team level, at the product level, at the executive level. And this is the biggest thing that we're working on.
Mhm.
And this is what makes us truly different. We don't have plugins. We don't have integrations with, a million different tools. We have everything in one platform out of the box. And that's kind of our motto, right? By building things this way, yeah, it's taken a lot more time. We had to be more thorough. We do a lot. However, we get the data that other systems just simply do not have.
100%.
And using that data allows us to create these AI personas, if you will, that are there to kind of put their hands around your shoulder and tell you the real truth about how your teams are doing. You no longer need manual metric gathering in Excel, Tableau integrations, all kinds of these weird things. And you especially need to go away from the subjective self-reporting statuses,
Right.
right? Because those are the things that will get people in trouble. let's be honest about what we're able to achieve and what we're not. If we were any other discipline like medicine or,
Mhm.
something that's a little bit more scientific and precise, we probably would need better systems. So this is what we're really going. And the most importantly is we don't change the engineers. We allow them to be themselves. We don't change the
Mm.
QA. We allow them to be themselves. We let just people work. And it's the observability that is all of a sudden picked up through the data that we create by facilitating a different type of project management process.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. And I think that, there's usually one thing that reigns true, for anybody that I've spoken to that, is doing things with agentic AI is that it really stands out to me the amount of domain expertise, all of the founders and leaders that come onto our podcast, that are running an AI company or they're doing stuff with agentic AI. Usually the successful use cases and the ones that actually move the mark come from teams and leaders such as yourself that have over 20 years of experience for the agentic AI that you are actually going to be deploying. So I'm really, really interested to see what you guys do and how you better leverage the behavioral data, as we've called it, that you're collecting from the way teams are working within your platform. I think that's definitely something I'll be on the lookout for on social media, and just so that way the audience knows, that way they're not looking on TikTok or whatever the case is. What outside of the website, what would be the best social media platform for them to go and maybe follow along with Project Simple?
Good question. This is where, again, I talk about our biggest weakness, which is
Yeah,
marketing. We're so busy, heads down. We
sure.
don't do a really good job laying everything out. So the website still is number one, but we started to heavily invest into YouTube. So we're going to
Nice.
start publishing videos in there. And because people need to see how the system actually works,
Yeah.
we've been sort of secretive for a long time. If I was to compare us with any other company, I would compare us with Figma, Notion. It took them 4.5 years to build out their product
Yeah.
for the market. And we kind of follow the same pattern
Mhm.
because the barrier to functionality is pretty high. And for the users to get full value out of the system, we needed to do a lot of things. Now we're finally at the point where everything we've learned from early customers, everything we've learned from ourselves using the system, already shaped it into a very powerful platform. So we will be adding a lot of the medium, the demos, we'll be hosting some webinars. So you could always follow on LinkedIn. This is the best piece outside of the website. Follow me because, well, I'm the I'm the person who's gonna talk about all the things that we create.
100%. I appreciate you being willing to have folks in the audience, able to actually reach out to you on LinkedIn as we share your profile as well. And I just wanted to tell you, Alex, thank you so much for coming on our podcast again and sharing your insights and your experience. I think, for us, a big thing that we're pushing for over the next year is to attach our brands to companies that are making a real impact. And so just from my experience and hearing a little bit about your background and what you guys are solving for, I think we were able to accomplish that mission today.
And likewise, Tyson, thanks for the invite. Always a pleasure chatting.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, guys. As I mentioned, let us know if you have any questions, and we will catch you guys in the next video.